Jim Kunkel here. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel and set the notification bell to all so that you won't miss any of my new content. Welcome to Global Topic. I'm Jim Kunkel. This episode will be another in the Carboline Technical Series, and it's going to be on coating considerations for various substrates in wastewater treatment plants. My guest today will be Brian Cheshire, who's a market manager for water and wastewater with Carboline. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hey, Brian, welcome to Global Topic.
Hey, Jim. Thank you for having me on today.
If you could do me a favor, if you could go through your background and also your role with Carboline.
Yeah, sure thing, Jim. So I've actually been in the coatings industry for the last 18 years, working on the coating manufacturing side. As far as industry involvement, I'm a NACE Level 2 certified coating inspector, member of SSPC, also involved with some of the water organizations, such as AWWA, the Water Environment Federation, the National Rural Water Association. But I'm also involved with two concrete societies, the American Concrete Institute and the International Concrete Repair Institute, which really speaks to our topic today and, among other things. But as far as my role at Carboline, so I'm the market manager for water wastewater, and that actually encompasses quite a few areas. So in this role, I'm involved with product development, product testing, promotional activities, developing sales tools for the field, and really much more. But ultimately, at the end of the day, my responsibility at Carboline, or my main responsibility, is the development and the execution of Carboline's company market strategy for the water wastewater market.
Well, I really appreciate you providing that background information and also covering your role with Carboline. So let me open up this episode and ask you this question. When considering water and wastewater treatment plants, roughly 80 to 85% of the substrates to be coated are concrete. In your experience, what are some of the factors that one must consider, when coating concrete structures in these settings?
Yeah, sure, Jim. So, there are really many reasons, kind of going back to your statement there, why concrete is used so prevalently. It's a very economical building material, and it provides some great physical properties, including high compressive strength and many others. But as you know, concrete is a very dynamic substrate that requires really many considerations prior to coating it. And concrete as a building material can vary from project to project. This is really due to the fact that the mix design can be altered in order to help it achieve different properties. The basic ingredients of concrete are fine aggregates, coarse aggregates, water, cement, air, and admixtures, but those can be altered in various percentages. And so for us in the coatings world, it's really important to note that concrete, first off, is porous in nature. Also, it's likely to develop cracks and is susceptible to chemical attack, which really comes up in the water wastewater market. These are really important things to consider when you're thinking about surface preparation, the repair, and really your coating application. But within a wastewater treatment plant, there are numerous potential applications where you would need to coat concrete. Some of these include concrete structures exposed to immersion. Some may have atmospheric exposure, and then others, that may involve secondary containment. And then also, you have plant service areas, so you may have miscellaneous areas like floors and wall coatings that are needed. But before you can really even think about coating a concrete substrate, you first really have to assess the surface and consider things like surface cleanliness, making sure the surface is free of contaminants and is at an acceptable pH. You also need to assess what repairs are needed, and also to what degree surface preparation needs to take place, which, as you know, is dependent on the exposure and the coating system selected. And, one standard that does a great job of laying that out is SSPC SB13. But before closing with concrete, I wanted to highlight, there's many reasons why it's important to coat concrete, specifically in wastewater environments. A coating system can provide barrier protection against many of the corrosive forces that we see in these areas. And I know you've had several past episodes and had several guests that have really dove headfirst into those and really talked about them in greater detail. For the sake of time today, we won't go into those in great detail, but just in a quick reference, some of those are, biogenic sulfide corrosion, carbonation, chloride-induced reinforcing steel corrosion, and then other things like erosion, cavitation, and then even abrasion. But I really tell you all this to highlight the importance of understanding the exposure conditions for your concrete substrate and really dependent on if you're in the collection or the treatment process, you really need to look at some more robust materials in some of those areas. And I know here at Carboline, we'll typically address a lot of those areas with some of our plasite linings and then also some of our reactamine products.
So as you know, Brian, in the wastewater treatment and water treatment industry, when the process is being done to really, get the materials taken care of, creating potable water, let's say, there's a lot of aggressive, like you mentioned, biological, there's a lot of chemicals involved. We talk heavily about concrete, and a lot of people talk about concrete more so, but there's also a lot of steel substrates that are also, present in water and wastewater, and they also require attention and coating. Could you give some additional considerations when preparing and coating the steel surfaces?
Yeah, yeah, sure thing, Jim. So, when you're talking about steel surfaces, we could really distinguish between new steel surfaces and then also previously coated, because that is a way of life with things getting primed in the shop and getting sent out to the field. But first, talking about new steel surfaces, steel is used very extensively because it's simple to weld, it's easy to fabricate. Um, but something to note about steel is if left untop coated, it's very susceptible to corrosion. As the steel is really always trying to revert back to its natural state, iron ore. In fact, there's a statistic that steel corrosion rates are about 10 mils per year in most wastewater environments if they're left untop coated. So, hence another reason there. But talking about steel, similar to concrete, you really have to consider some of the various exposures. Is this going to be immersion? Is it going to be just atmospheric exposure, or is it going to be intermittent immersion? So, on top of that, there's various means of surface prep. You've got standard blasting operations. You've got wet abrasive blasting that has really grown in popularity over the last few years. But when you're talking about immersion, you're typically going to see an SSPC SP10 or even a SP5. Atmospheric, you can sometimes get away with an SP2, SP3. But in some cases, you still need a commercial blast in SP6. But as you note, and as has been covered many times on your show, the service life of a coating and on really any substrate, but especially steel, is directly proportional to that degree of surface prep. So, the surface prep and closing really should match the coating system, the anticipated exposure, and your owner's expectations. But that's covering new steel. I would say considering previously coated metals or previously coated steel, a lot of these are going to come in shop prime to a job site. So you really have to consider the age of that coating, and consider its applicable recoat window and plan accordingly.
Addition to concrete and steel, what are some of the other substrates that one might come across, in one of these types of projects for water and wastewater?
Yeah, so a few different miscellaneous materials here. The first of which is ductile iron. This is used a lot in wastewater treatment, also used in transmission. But without really getting into the metallurgical process of ductile iron, I want to point out, this is a very different material than steel. Ductile iron, it has very good tensile strength, very good durability. And while some of the surface preparation methods of it are similar to steel, the degree of cleanliness and the profile, really goes beyond the scope of a lot of your SSPC standards. So for that reason, with ductile iron, you'll see the associated standard put out by NAPF, which is the National Association of Pipe Fabricators, and they go through different degrees of cleaning, different degrees of surface preparation there, really depending on if it's a pipe, if it's a fitting, is it an outside diameter coating, or even is it a lining. But um, I do want to point out that ductile iron pipe specifically often comes to the job site with a layer of an asphaltic coating on it, which often must be removed before applying a high performance coating system. Um, but ductile iron pipe does also come in to the job site bare, but you'll also see epoxy primers put on the outside diameter of these as well. So it's just important to be able to assess the particular piece of pipe or fitting, and really know what's coming on it, to where you'll know how to plan your surface preparation. But in addition to ductile iron, you also see some non-ferrous metals used, such as galvanizing, aluminum, stainless. Um, and you're going to see applications where these need to be coated, especially when they're in contact with other metals. Because, as you know, dissimilar metal corrosion is a very common form of corrosion that you see, where you may see a galvanized or stainless steel bolt attached to carbon steel. That corrosion process is accelerated in those cases. So, a coating can help in those situations, especially where they're in contact with each other. But the main point I want to make about the non-ferrous metals is, you're going to have to treat these differently than you would steel. So it may be some different methods. It may also be some different blast media that you have to consider here. But I did want to point out that SSPC SP16 is a standard that you'll see commonly referenced, because it's written to really address a lot of these non-ferrous metals. But Jim, in closing on some of the miscellaneous substrates, you may see some others, such as PVC, FRP. And the main thing to know about those is, these can be hard to stick to materials. So you need to consider adhesion, and need to consider your surface prep, and also figure in a primer that has good tenacious bonding properties.
So, hey, Brian, recently I received an email from Carboline, and it was an announcement about a online, I believe it's a tool related to water wastewater, which shows each part of the treatment process, and it provided detailed information. Could you go through a little bit about that online resource?
Oh, definitely, Jim. We're very excited about this new tool. We feel it's gives you a different way of looking at some of these areas. But the name of the tool is the Wastewater Asset Protection Guide. And so this is an interactive tool, a virtual tool that walks the viewer through the wastewater collection, transmission, and treatment process. So within this guide, you can dial into a specific part of the treatment plant, and then from there can even look at the individual structures, and then dive in even further and look within that structure, and look at some of the different substrates that are commonly coated within those structures, which really fits into what we're talking about today, because a lot of the things that I've mentioned about these various substrates and exposures, we definitely considered when putting this together. But I wanted to point out this resource is available on carboline.com. It's under the resources tab, and it's also on our water wastewater market page on carboline.com. And Jim, I think it would really be helpful for your viewers if we could provide that link to them in the notes for this episode.
Definitely, definitely. And the thing that, the last relatively almost 3 years now with SSPC, the Society for Protective Coatings, my job, my role, I've been focused a lot on concrete, but a lot in water, wastewater. And the thing that I found is that there's so much, it's still a wild, wild west. There's a lot of stuff that people don't really understand properly to deal with corrosion and erosion and all the things that really impact that infrastructure that we rely on every day. A resource like this is great for the engineering firms that are out there, and some of the specification firms too, but also too for coating professionals. If you're a contractor, there's a lot of things you can learn from resources like this, and I definitely will put the link to that. But I do appreciate Carboline for providing that and going to the detail that you guys did in that resource, because it's very detailed, very thorough. But it does tie in your products, which is really good to know, because even looking at what generic coating systems, it gives you a better understanding of what can be brought to bear against corrosion, erosion, the protection of steel, concrete, and other substrates in water and wastewater treatment operations. Kind of closing out this episode, Brian, this has been a great conversation. Is there anything that we did not talk about that you would want to leave with the viewers?
Yeah, so many of the things we discussed today can really be laid out in a well-written project specification. Understanding such things as the service environment, as we alluded to, throughout the treatment process, there's different corrosion mechanisms that may be present in different parts of it. So understanding where you are there can be very helpful to make sure you've got the right materials specified. And then also, considering the different substrates that are to be coated, because as we alluded to, there's different surface preparation standards. There's different considerations, really, when you look at items from substrate to substrate. And then, talking about that well-written specification, that it's going to do a good job of laying out the necessary surface preparation, any application requirements that are specific to the job site. And really any other factors, that need to be clarified before a job even starting. So, but yeah. In closing, I definitely want to highlight that this stuff can definitely be laid out in great detail beforehand, and it typically will make your jobs go a lot smoother.
I 100% agree with you, because I do get to see specifications. And another point that you said, well written, you want to write it out. You don't want to cut and paste, because things can be lost and things can be confusing if you do a cut and paste and try to create a specification that way versus writing it out. It's better to write it out, because it's more thorough and more hopefully understandable for people and everything, contractors and other professionals that are looking at that specification. Brian, I really greatly appreciate this opportunity to talk with you today.
Jim, thank you again for having me. I enjoyed our time together, and I hope that some of the things we talked about will be very helpful for your viewers.
Yeah, and for the viewers, I will have links to stuff that Brian and I did cover. I encourage you to go visit the Carboline website, go to the resource tab, look at information. Also to Brian and also to Carboline, I appreciate this opportunity for this technical series with you to feature some of the subject matter experts that I've had the opportunity to work with over the number of years that I've been in the industry. And thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you again, Jim.
Hey, have a great day.
Hey, you too. Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Global Topic. I'd like to say thank you to Carboline for providing some great subject matter experts to talk about some very interesting topics in the protective coatings industry. Please remember to like and share this video, and also subscribe to my channel. Over 80% of my views are from people not subscribed. And I really need you to subscribe to my channel so that you can keep up on the latest industry topics in the corrosion and protective coatings industry. Now we're going into 2021, and you're going to see more content coming from me related to the industry. And I really need and appreciate your support. So once again, thank you for watching this video. Have a great day. So Joe, for the lay person who's watching this episode who might only think that corrosion engineering